What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be breaking down how you guys can go out and dominate your Yahoo fantasy football drafts. So I hopped into a bunch of different mock drafts. I took a hard look at their platform rankings to try to find some of the value pockets, looking at what positions you should be targeting, in different points in the draft. So I'm going to be giving you guys some overall guidelines to try to follow to build some solid rosters. I'll also be diving into a couple of different mock drafts. And so to kind of prep for this video, the first thing I did was I took my personal rankings and then I compared them to the Yahoo platform rankings to try to just find, specific values and not just player by player, because I know player takes are going to differ, but more so just like certain pockets in the draft where certain positions are maybe at a value, sometimes where they're being, potentially overdrafted. And so if you guys want that Google Sheet, I can just link it in the description. And so as you guys can see here, in the early rounds, there's nothing crazy in terms of like screaming values. I do just want to start off at the running back position. And through the first 12 running backs, right, this is the first like 2.5 rounds. There's nothing wild. There's certain players I'm a little bit lower on, like a Derrick Henry, a Josh Jacobs, Kyron Williams, certain guys I'm higher on, a Devon Achane or a Chase Brown. Nothing crazy. I think where we start to see some real value at running back is when we get to like mid-round 3 through round 5. Now, I don't think this is just like an overall sweet spot at the position. There are still guys that I'm not huge fans of, at least relative to price. So like a Chuba Hubbard, a Breece Hall, Alvin Kamara, James Conner, Tony Pollard way pushed up on Yahoo. I think like overall consensus rankings, I'm actually kind of interested in him. Specifically on Yahoo, I just think that price is pretty wild. But I think you can get some really nice values in this range. Looking at like an Amarian Hampton, a James Cook in the middle of the 3rd round. This is something I have talked about, but mid-round 3, it gets pretty gross, and I'll probably mention this with the wide receivers, but I'm trying to fade wide receiver in that range and take running back, tight end, quarterback, pretty much anything but like these lower upside wide receiver picks. I also really like Kenneth Walker. He's like an early 4th round pick on Yahoo. I'd be willing to take a mid-round 3. And then the 2 rookies, RJ Harvey, Travion Henderson, guys I'm definitely targeting on Yahoo. Also, I don't know if I explained this at the top, but what you're looking at here, so these players are sorted by the Yahoo rankings. That's what this ADP is. The rank is my personal ranking. So they are sorted by Yahoo, and then the difference is, the difference between my rankings and Yahoo. The greener they are, the better values I think they are personally. Then I think we kind of hit a real rough patch at the running back position, which is why I do kind of like getting running backs early on Yahoo, because we look at this range when we're going from like Tyrone Tracy to Ramondre Stevenson. This is like round 7 running backs. It feels like you're reaching for some of these dudes, right? Tracy, Warren, B-Rob, he'll probably drop, but as of right now, still ranked like in the 70s. Jordan Mason, Tank Bigsby, Ramondre Stevenson. Like Jalen Warren's like the one guy that I don't think is like an egregiously bad pick here. But for some of these other dudes, like these are committee backs that you're kind of drafting as if they're going to be the season-long starter. And when we look at the wide receiver position, you're going to see you can get a lot of really solid values in this range. And so ideally, I'm not really trying to like have to draft a running back here. I'm not forced into, picking Tyrone Tracy as my running back 2 at like the 6-7 turn. That is a position I'm just kind of trying to avoid. But then I think when we start to get really late into drafts, like the handcuffs and overall depth options become some really solid picks. So you can see here, just like way ahead of consensus on pretty much all of these dudes. And like this varies from just like pure handcuffs with like an Isaac Guerrero, a Tyler Algier, to potential committee backs like an Austin Eckler, a Jaden Blue, Quinshon Judkins. I mean, his rank is going to shoot up. This was just, not necessarily updated with his, return news, but just across the board, like you can get some really nice depth at running back. And so if you can kind of beat that gross round 7, round 8 area, have solid running backs, and then get some value later on to kind of build out the depth, I do think that's a nice way to approach the running back position. And I will cover this in like the overall guidelines after all the positions. But I think ideally you should be leaving with at least 2 running backs through 5 rounds, just so you have that position on lock, at least the starters, and you're not trying to force it later on and then, end up passing up on value at other positions. So now let's look at the wide receivers. And as you guys can see, I'm pretty in line with all the elite dudes, right? I guess the one guy that stands out is I think Puka's ranked a little bit low, a little bit higher in A.J. Brown, T. Higgins, but for the most part, pretty in line there. Once we're getting into like JSN, Garrett Wilson, Mike Evans, Marvin Harrison Jr., when they start to go in the 3rd round, it's pretty easy for me to just say, like, I'm out. I'd rather draft running backs. I would rather draft quarterbacks. I'd rather draft tight ends. Also, just specifically on Yahoo, like if I can go with like the James Cook, the Amarian Hamptons over like a Garrett Wilson, Mike Evans, that's just like a no-brainer pick for me. Even like a Kenneth Walker, I'll throw him in there and take them over some of these wide receivers. But then when we get into round 7, which is where I talked about the running back position starts to fall off, that's where pretty much every wide receiver just becomes a screaming value. And like I've mentioned, like you don't have to agree with my individual player rankings, but just across the board, I am significantly higher on these guys than where they're going on Yahoo. And so like you can go for your safer veterans, like, a Jacoby Myers, a Juwan Jennings, guys like that. You can also take your upside shots on younger players like in a Emeka Egbuka, a Matthew Golden. I really think you can pretty much go with anyone here. There's literally one player that I'm lower on than consensus in this entire range from wide receiver 37 to wide receiver 55. And that is Rashid Shaheed, who I'm like almost completely in line with consensus. And so this is just a spot where I want to be taking wide receiver. I don't want to like have stocked up on wide receiver early on, especially like take a wide receiver mid round 3. And now I'm passing on these guys trying to make up ground at other positions, whether that's running back, quarterback, wide receiver. I do want to be able to hammer wide receiver in this range. So like round 7, round 8, round 9. Ideally, those are just all wideouts. Like maybe there's a quarterback or a tight end thrown in there. But the fact that like round 7, round 8, round 9, I could go Jacoby Myers, Emeka Egbuka, Josh Downs, and just stack up on wide receiver depth. I do think this is a range where you should just be, firing at wide receiver round after round. Now let's take a look at the quarterback position. And as you guys can see here, I'm kind of in line with Yahoo when it comes to the elite quarterbacks. So like the clear top 4 with Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels, and Jalen Hurts. And then after that, I'm like pretty significantly lower on these quarterbacks than Yahoo, where like you can see a lot of these dudes like are pushed up like 10 plus spots compared to my rankings. There's like, one kind of outlier in like Kyler Murray, who I'm like fairly in line with. But this doesn't mean that I'm just like not drafting a quarterback and I'm just going to like wait and pick one with the last turn. That's not what this means. What it does mean is that I'm going to be more interested in taking these elite quarterbacks where like personally, if I'm in line with consensus on those guys and I'm just way behind consensus on the other ones, then it kind of means that just those elite quarterbacks are going to be better values relative to my rankings. And so even for these guys that it looks like I'm very low on, at some point there's going to be a faller at the quarterback position where in your league, the elite guys, the Lamar Jackson owners, the Josh Allen owners, they're probably not going to be reaching up to take like a second quarterback. And so at some point, some of these guys are going to fall, whether that's like a Drake May, a Caleb Williams, a Justin Herbert, a Jordan Love. You are going to get one of these guys to fall past the Yahoo ranking because you're just not going to have like 7, 8, 9 guys spamming the second quarterback within the first 12 rounds. Maybe you are, and that's your league, and you'll have to adjust. But like typically, that's not something you're going to see a lot. And so you're going to get one of these later round guys. I think there's a lot of depth at quarterback this year. I'm really not afraid to just wait if I don't get one of those elite options. And so if I get, Lamar, Allen, Daniels, Hurts, awesome. If I don't, I'm fine to wait and just see if a value kind of emerges. And then now let's look at the final position here, the tight ends. And this is kind of a similar story to the quarterbacks, not quite as extreme, but I am very in on the elite options. Brock Bowers, Trey McBride have both those guys, ahead of the Yahoo rankings. And then for the most part, kind of out on a lot of the other guys. There's, like an Evan Ingram thrown in there, who I am kind of high on. Kelsey and Njoku somewhat in line with consensus, but I do think Kittle's pushed up, Laporta, Hawkinson. I think like this Kraft, Ferguson, Kincaid, Goddard group is just way pushed up. Like that's an overall range at tight end that I would just be completely avoiding. I do think what's interesting, though, is you look at like a Colston Loveland, a Tyler Warren. Those are the guys that kind of stand out as being values. And that does lead me into this next section where I just want to talk about rookies in general. I think across the board, rookies continue to kind of be a cheat code in fantasy where they're pushed down in, rankings, ADP, because they haven't really proven anything. But you can take a swing on a rookie and they can end up being a league winner for you. Like I look back last year and you had like Brian Thomas Jr., Lad McConkey just like buried down in the rankings. I'm even a Malik Neighbors. I have it right here. So Neighbors on Yahoo was the wide receiver 28. He was a round 6 pick. Lad McConkey, wide receiver 44, round 10 pick. BTJ, wide receiver 52, round 11. These are all guys that I talked about in my Yahoo draft strategy video last year. So if you were able to go out, get those rookies on a discount, you certainly could have put together like a real juggernaut team. And you can see here, I'm pretty much ahead of consensus on like every rookie with the exception of Genty, who I'm right in line with. And then two of the running backs with Caleb Johnson and Dylan Sampson. And the Dylan Sampson thing is only because I don't think Yahoo's like adjusted after the Quinshon Judkins news. But like Travion Henderson, Tet McMillan, Travis Hunter, Mekik Buka, Matthew Golden, all amazing values. Later on in drafts, when you're drafting dudes that are going to be on your bench, you want to shoot for upside. That's where I'm drafting like a Jaden Higgins, a Luther Bird, and I already talked about it at tight end. But like for late round tight ends, I think Colston Loveland and Tyler Warren are like clearly the best two picks. And then even getting deeper, like Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, his value will probably rise on Yahoo. And then even like a Kyle Williams, like a fun rookie pick that's potentially going undrafted in a lot of Yahoo leagues. Now let's take a look at some of the ideal guidelines I've kind of put together. Once again, you don't have to follow this, 100%. If you get falling values in different spots, if the draft board is playing out differently than expected, obviously you should not be set in stone. You should be willing to pivot, but these are things I've kind of been following and have found some success in my Yahoo drafts. So the first one is going to be drafting at least 2 running backs through round 5. This is something I'm like pretty locked in on. And I am someone who talks about like going best player available, then adjusting when you get later on in drafts. What I have seen though is that if you don't have 2 running backs through the first 5 rounds, you can kind of get put in a locker at the position where you're either just going to have to like not have a solid running back 2, or you're going to have to reach for someone also, in turn bypassing on a lot of value at wide receiver. So I have really tried to force it. That might mean taking like a Kenneth Walker and a Marion Hampton over a guy like T. Higgins, who I do have ranked higher, but I just know that I would much rather take Jacoby Myers in round 7 than have to take like a Tyrone Tracy or Jordan Mason in that same spot. I just think it's going to, be better off in the long run if you do get at least 2 starting caliber running backs early on. And then when we look at the quarterback and tight end positions, I really have been looking either at the elite options or just waiting at the position and getting whoever falls late. I haven't loved drafting mid-round options. Now, once again, that's not set in stone. If you get a falling value with like a Kyler Murray, a Patrick Mahomes, like by all means, pull the trigger there. Same thing at tight end. Like I still like Evan Ingram in the middle rounds, but for the most part, I'm targeting an elite option. And then if I don't get one of those lead options, I am waiting until later on. I think you should be targeting that like mid to late round wide receiver depth. That's really like the biggest takeaway is like you should just be smashing wide receiver round 7, round 8, round 9. And then you also have that nice like value pocket of the running backs who are kind of, mispriced later on in drafts. And then the last guideline here, you should be targeting rookies. I think these are some of the best values. They were some of the best values last year. I think it can be the same thing here in 2025. And so now let's close out this video by diving into a couple of mock drafts. I do apologize. The Yahoo overall like draft board isn't super aesthetically pleasing, but this is a draft from the 103. Just kind of going to run through our picks, some of the philosophy here. So we start off 103, go with Jahmyr Gibbs. This is my best player available. I will say, like, say I had the 104, right? And CeeDee Lamb would have been my best player available. On Yahoo, I would consider kind of pivoting and taking a Saquon Barkley just to try to lock down one of those running back spots. I'll also throw in that this is like the typical Yahoo roster setup. So it's like 1 quarterback, 2 wide receivers, 2 running backs, a tight end, and then 1 flex. I think especially when you're only playing with like 1 flex and it's kind of a smaller starting lineup, it makes it even more important and more valuable to get some of those elite options at quarterback and tight end, while also not just completely punting one specific position, like a running back 2 spot. So in round 2, I do get that elite tight end with Brock Bowers. Then we get into round 3, and I go with Josh Allen. Now, I do think this could have been a T. Higgins pick. He would have technically been my best player available, but since I know there's going to be value at wide receiver later on, I'm fine going, taking that swing at quarterback. So I do draft Josh Allen. We have elite quarterback, elite tight end. Don't even have to think about those positions for the rest of the draft. Then we get into round 4, this like 5-6 turn, and this is a spot where I was pretty locked in that I needed at least 1 running back. Travion Henderson was already off the board. And so I would have been fine taking like Chuba here in the 5th round, James Conner also, who goes after me in the 5th. But I didn't really want to mess around. Like I would have been really pissed if this was like Chuba and James Conner just right away here with like the first and second picks. That would have been really frustrating. And if they took Harvey. So I just wanted to lock down a running back. Harvey was my best running back available. We get him to be our RB2. And then you can see from round 5 through round 9, we just hammer the wide receiver position. And I still feel pretty good about our wide receivers, even though we waited, right? So we go Xavier Worthy, round 5. We go Travis Hunter, late round 6, rookie, great value. We go Roma Dunze in the 7th. We go Josh Downs in the 8th. Also love the value there. And then we take Chris Godwin in the early 9th. I'm honestly shocked that Chris Godwin's going so low. I know he's coming off the injury, and there's certainly concern there, but this dude was the wide receiver 2 in points per game before he went down. Round 9, I think, is just crazy value. Then we start to get back on the running back position. We go Jaden Blue in round 10. Round 12, 13, we go Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt and Ray Davis. We had one more wide receiver thrown in there with Darnell Mooney. Like, to wait at wide receiver, to punt until round 5, and then to get Darnell Mooney as our wide receiver 6, I feel very solid with that wide receiver room. And then, finish it out with kicker, Cameron Dicker, and then defense, Arizona Cardinals, not super focused on that. But so we look at this team. Obviously, we are stacked at quarterback. We are stacked at tight end. I feel very good about our RB1. RJ Harvey, maybe not like a smash play early on in the season, but I still think he'll be playable, and then we'll build later on. I feel pretty decent about our running back depth. Jaden Blue, kind of a committee guy, rookie, could break out. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, just keeps gaining steam. Like, might potentially be playable in week 1 if they move on from B-Rob. And then Ray Davis, more of like that pure handcuff. But I do like the way this draft played out. If we didn't lock down those running backs early on, like, we could have been reaching for a Tyrone Tracy. Jaylen Warren, I don't think, is the worst pick here, but like around 8 Dobbins doesn't feel great. And so instead, we're just able to clean up on value at the wide receiver spot. And now let's look at the second mock draft here, second and final. This is from the 109. So I'm going best player available in the first round. I go with Puka Nacua. Now with the 109, you could make the case like, do you force a running back pick with like a Genty, an Achane, a Derrick Henry? I'd probably still go wide receiver in this range. If this was, Christian McCaffrey available, I certainly would have gone with CMC, but I don't want to force it too much. So I go with Puka Nacua here in the first. Then round 2, I believe this was my best player available, went with Devon Achane at the 204. So we have at least one running back. Then we get into like the 309 area. If Trey McBride went there, that would have been awesome. This was me kind of debating between George Kittle, James Cook, Kyron Williams, Kenneth Walker, like tight end or that tier of running backs. I do believe I have Kittle ranked behind those guys, but I was looking at this team and I didn't think I was going to get an elite quarterback. And so I wanted at least one elite option, either at the quarterback position or the tight end. It wasn't going to happen at quarterback. So I do lock down George Kittle. Then round 4, I get my RB2 through 5 with Travion Henderson. Round 5 through 7, we hammer wide receiver with Tet McMillan, Travis Hunter again, Zay Flowers. Like I was talking about with the guidelines, you don't have to be set in stone on only elite or late round quarterback. This was a spot where Kyler's available at the 804. I felt comfortable pulling the trigger there. So Kyler's going to be our quarterback 1 here. We go round 9, Travis Etienne. Etienne kind of starts the area where like the running backs feel like fine picks. Like if you're going to have B-Rob, Tracy, Warren, Mason all pushed up, it seems like Travis Etienne should probably be in that tier. Now, I'm not bullish that he is going to be like the full season starter, but I think he's going to be playable early on. You could make a case he's a better play than Henderson week 1. I think Henderson's gaining a lot of steam, though. I take that back. I would definitely play Travion Henderson over him, but he's a fine RB3 to start off the season. He's going to be relevant early on. We get Eckler, Benson as our running back 4 and 5. We go Matthew Golden round 10. Round 10, Matthew Golden is honestly just like wild. I wasn't even super in on him as a prospect. Didn't love him in Dynasty, but like this redraft price is going to be an easy pick for me. And then we have another rookie with Luther Burden. You could argue this is overkill at the rookie spot. We have Tet, we have Travis Hunter, we have Golden, we have Burden, but especially with like shallower lineups, we know Puka's going to be starting. We know Achane, Henderson are going to be starting. We're looking at like one wide receiver and a flex. I feel very confident starting Zay Flowers week 1. And then Tet, I know he's a rookie, but I still think he's a solid play. And then you could kind of just wait for like Hunter, Golden to start to break out. Luther Burden, definitely more of a stash, but super talented player. I do think he could be a interesting later season option. So I like our wide receiver room. I like our top 2 running backs. We have an elite tight end. Even though we kind of waited at quarterback, I still feel very good with Kyler as our quarterback one. And so hopefully this video helps you guys go out, dominate your Yahoo drafts. I do think getting those running backs early on, hammering wide receiver in some of those mid to late rounds can just lead to some really, really fun rosters. So let me know how your drafts go. If you enjoy the video, hit the like button and subscribe. Thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.